Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that a single flower costs more than your house. Not a rare diamond, not a Picasso painting, a flower. And people aren't buying it because they love gardening. They're buying it because they believe someone else will pay even more next week. Now imagine selling your farm, borrowing money from your neighbors, trading your family's life savings, all for the chance to own one tiny bulb buried underground. Sounds ridiculous, right? But nearly 400 years ago, this actually happened. Entire fortunes were built overnight. Families became rich without producing anything. And then, almost instantly, everything collapsed. This wasn't Bitcoin. It wasn't GameStop. It wasn't the dot-com bubble. This was tulip mania, the world's first documented financial bubble. And the scary part, the exact same psychology that fooled people in the 1600s still fools investors today. To understand how something so absurd happened, we have to travel back to the Dutch Republic in the early 1600s. At the time, the Netherlands was one of the richest places on earth. Its ships dominated global trade. Its merchants controlled valuable goods from Asia. Business was booming. People had money, lots of it. And when people become wealthy, they don't just buy necessities, they buy status. Today it might be luxury watches, sports cars, designer handbags. Back then, it was tulips. Ironically, tulips weren't even native to the Netherlands. They originally came from the Ottoman Empire, where they were admired by sultans and nobles. When the flowers finally reached Europe, they became symbols of elegance and sophistication. Only the wealthy could afford them. Owning exotic tulips was like owning a Ferrari parked in your front yard. But something unexpected happened. Certain tulips developed spectacular flame-like streaks of red, purple, and white across their petals. No two looked exactly alike. People believed they were incredibly rare. And because they were rare, they became even more desirable. Little did anyone know those beautiful patterns were actually caused by a virus infecting the flower. The disease weakened the tulips, but made them infinitely more valuable. Sometimes perfection is born from imperfection. At first, collectors simply bought tulips to display in their gardens. Nothing unusual there. But eventually people noticed something strange. Prices kept rising. A bulb purchased this month could be sold next month for twice as much. Then 3 times. Then 10 times. Suddenly, people weren't buying tulips because they loved flowers. They were buying them because they expected prices to keep going up forever. And that's the moment everything changed. Merchants started trading bulbs they hadn't even planted yet. Farmers stopped focusing on crops. Craftsmen abandoned their workshops. Even ordinary laborers entered the market. Because why spend months working when one lucky trade could earn an entire year's income? Imagine hearing your neighbor doubled his money in a week. Then your cousin tripled hers. Then the blacksmith quit his job because he made more trading flowers than making horseshoes. Eventually, you'd start wondering whether you were the fool for staying out. That's how bubbles spread. Not through logic, through envy. Here's where the story becomes surprisingly modern. Most people imagine buyers physically exchanging tulip bulbs every day. They weren't. Many were simply trading contracts, promises, pieces of paper that gave someone the right to buy a bulb later. Sound familiar? It's remarkably similar to modern derivatives and futures contracts. The bulbs themselves barely moved. The paper changed hands over and over again, each time at a higher price. People who had never seen the actual flower were making fortunes trading ownership rights. The market became disconnected from reality. Prices no longer reflected beauty, or rarity, or usefulness. They reflected only one belief: someone else would pay more tomorrow. Economists call this the greater fool theory. You're willing to overpay because you believe there's an even greater fool waiting behind you. And as long as everyone believes that, the illusion continues. By early 1637, tulip prices had become unbelievable. One famous variety called the Semper Augustus became legendary. Historical accounts suggest a single bulb could cost as much as an elegant house in Amsterdam. Think about that. A flower worth an entire home. Some people exchanged livestock, furniture, land, businesses, even life savings for bulbs that hadn't even bloomed. Imagine explaining that investment to your grandchildren. I traded our family farm for a flower. It sounds impossible. Yet thousands believed they were making the smartest financial decision of their lives because every day the market rewarded optimism until one ordinary morning. It didn't. No dramatic announcement, no government intervention, no economic disaster, just a routine auction. One group of buyers simply refused to pay the asking price. Maybe they thought prices had climbed too high. Maybe they ran out of money. Maybe fear finally replaced greed. Whatever the reason, that tiny hesitation spread like wildfire. If nobody wanted today's tulips, who would buy yours tomorrow? Confidence vanished almost overnight. Buyers disappeared. Prices collapsed. Contracts became worthless. People who believed they were millionaires suddenly owned flowers nobody wanted. Fortunes evaporated. Businesses failed. Families were ruined. And the hardest lesson of all, the flowers themselves hadn't changed. The only thing that changed was what people believed they were worth. Interestingly, historians still debate exactly how massive tulip mania truly was. Some argue later writers exaggerated the story. Others believe only a relatively small group of wealthy traders participated. But regardless of the exact numbers, the psychological lesson remains undeniable. Humans repeatedly convince themselves this time is different. Every generation believes it has discovered a shortcut to effortless wealth, and every generation eventually learns the same painful lesson. Price and value are not the same thing. Something can become incredibly expensive without becoming any more valuable. Tulip mania wasn't really about flowers. It was about human nature. It's about what happens when greed becomes stronger than reason, when fear of missing out overpowers common sense, when everyone around you seems to be getting rich and standing still feels like falling behind. We've seen it with internet stocks, housing, cryptocurrency, meme stocks, NFTs, different assets, same emotions. Because technology changes, markets evolve, but human psychology barely changes at all. The next bubble probably won't involve flowers. It'll involve something new, something exciting, something that everyone knows will only keep going higher. And when that moment comes, remember the tulips. Because the greatest investment lesson in history wasn't about making money. It was about keeping your head when everyone else loses theirs. Real wealth isn't built by chasing whatever everyone else is buying. It's built by understanding value, remaining patient, and refusing to confuse popularity with wisdom. The flowers eventually wilted, the hype disappeared, but the lesson has survived for nearly 4 centuries. And if history has taught us anything, it's that bubbles don't begin with numbers. They begin with people believing they're smarter than history itself.